What would you say your definition of an addiction is?
Addiction to me is a person being so attached to a certain behavior or object that it becomes debilitating to their life and others in some way.
Perfect. What's your name?
My name's Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca. What would you say your definition of an addiction is?
Something where you try to stop but it's really hard to or nearly impossible to.
I would say my definition of addiction is, it's a really good question. I would say it's like a substance that you necessarily can't go without for a certain period of time.
I would say just like you're dependent on something, you have to do it to feel normal. I don't know. It's kind of a complicated thing. But
Totally.
Oh, perfect.
you're dependent and it's like negatively affecting how you live your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you define an addiction as?
I kind of echo that and say that it's something that you're dependent on and that you really can't stop doing.
Hi, what's your name?
Emerson Connor.
Can you tell me what your definition of an addiction is?
I think just being attached to something that you feel like you can't function without.
What's your name?
My name's Maddie.
Hi, Maddie. What would you say your definition of an addiction is?
Probably something that like affects what you do and you have to like keep going back to it and you need more in order to like feel satisfied from it.
Okay. Do you think you know someone with addiction? That's not like limited to illicit substances.
Yes.
Do you think you know somebody that has an addiction that doesn't have to be like substances?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know somebody that has an addiction?
Yes, I do.
And so not limited to illicit substances or alcohol or anything like that, would you say you know somebody that has an addiction?
Yes.
Yes. And what about you?
Yes.
Yeah? Not limited to illicit substances, do you think you know somebody that has an addiction?
I'd say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah. Do you think you know somebody that has an addiction that's not limited to substances?
Yes.
Do you know somebody that has an addiction that's not limited to like illicit substances that can be anything?
Yes.
Yeah? Do you think you know somebody that has an addiction?
I'd say probably.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. If you had to describe somebody that has an addiction, what would you describe them as?
I would probably describe them as a person and how they are, because addictions don't define you.
Perfect.
They don't pay attention to like real life things, I guess. Like things that are happening in the moment.
I think it probably comes in all shapes and sizes. I don't think there's necessarily one conformity that they all look like. But I do think, like he said, it interferes with their life, and it's probably something that they struggle with, and probably help out a little bit. So.
Totally. If you had to describe somebody that has an addiction, what would you describe them as?
I describe them as somebody who's very dependent on either the act or the object in a capacity that's making it so they're distracted from other things in life, whether that be work, schooling, taking care of themselves, etc.
Perfect.
I think a lot of times they just kind of look like normal people, and then like you don't really notice it until it becomes like a huge problem.
Totally.
I think not very present in their lives. Like they kind of have their mind on their addiction a lot of the time. It's affecting how you interact with them, how you, and negatively. You're not as involved in their life, they're not as involved in your life.
Yeah. Perfect.
Probably sad, kind of trapped.
Yeah.
Those are the first words
Yeah.
in mind.
And what about you?
Yeah, I think trapped is a good way to put it. Also, just kind of confined because they're because of that focus on the one thing that they are drawn towards.
What kind of issue would you say addiction is? Would you say it's moral, legal, or like disease?
I think sometimes it can be classified as a disease, and if your addiction oversteps the bounds of the law, then yeah, legal. But I think more often than not, it's what you determine to be right and moral. I think if you're addicted to something bad, you probably know it's bad, but you keep on going back to it. So, moral.
I've just seen a lot of studies that if you start legalizing a lot of things that are illegal, such as like drugs and stuff, it makes the community more like inclusive about it. And so I don't think it's a moral issue. I think it's kind of a legal issue because it has such a stigma around it that people feel isolated, and so they continue to go to that addiction in order to like feel satisfied, and it just isolates them more and creates a problem.
What kind of issue would you say addiction is? Would you say it's a disease, a legal issue, or a moral issue?
Kind of a disease. Yeah.
Okay. Who would you say is at fault for an addiction? Would you say it's the person, the drug, their family, society, culture, etc.?
Any of those factors could play into an addiction.
Perfect.
I think probably companies and individuals and how society has raised people all play individual parts. But I also think because they all play a part, they all need to help with the recovery process as well and lowering your addiction rates.
100%. Perfect. Thank you.
The circumstances a person are in and socioeconomically and all that can affect their disposition to addiction. There's genetic parts to it that may make it easier for them to become addicted, but there's also, companies or larger institutions that may also be pushing those products that make it addictive.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone to blame.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Who would you say is at fault for an addiction?
Wow. Like, it's partly their fault, but it's not entirely, right? Like,
yeah,
we believe in second chances too, so.
It can be a lot of circumstances that lead to addictions happening, like whether that be just the way like society is structured, that like there are people who it's just a lot easier for them to fall into addiction. Some people also just make poor choices, and it just leads them down a path that they don't want to be on. I think it really just depends on the person, but like no matter how someone ended up getting addicted to something, you have to treat them with like compassion and understand that like it is a disease. And, they're not a worse person for their addiction.
Totally.
Now that we know what people think about addiction, we are going to talk about some of the realities of addiction. How many people suffer with an addiction? With alcohol, there's 12 million alcoholics in the US. In 2018, 2/3 of adults aged 18 and over consumed alcohol in the past year. College students, 40 to 45% of college students binge drink. With illicit drugs, 13% 12 and up used an illicit drug in the past month. And there was 106,699 drug overdose deaths. What is the definition of addiction? Addiction is defined as a chronic, relapsing brain disease that is characterized by compulsive drug seeking and use, despite harmful consequences. Not everyone who uses an illicit substance has an addiction. The addiction develops on a continuum. First, it starts with abstinence, then it's experimentation or regular use, then abuse, then dependence, then addiction, and then finally it could lead to death. This is the pain/shame cycle that occurs with addiction. You can start out with pain, then that will lead to the compulsive behavior, which is the addiction. Then you'll find relief to that addiction, and then there could be negative consequences that come from your addiction, and then that leads to more guilt and shame, which leads back to the pain, and it just goes in a continuous cycle. However, if you don't use an addiction, you use a coping behavior, then you'll gain self-esteem, and then there's positive consequences, and then you will eventually have resiliency to overcome your addiction. What type of issue is an addiction? Addiction is a complex disease, as we can see here in the biopsychosocial spiritual model. that addiction will affect all of these realms. So it's important to realize that it's a disease that is affecting all of these realms. Who is at fault in addiction? It's a bit more complicated than you might think. The thing with all of the power is the addiction. See part 3 to learn more about how families and relationships influence and are influenced by addiction.
A lot of times when we talk about addiction, we're talking only about those who have the addiction. But addiction isn't just about the individuals who have the addiction. I mean, addiction doesn't just affect those who have the addiction. We need to widen the conversation. Addiction often contributes to imbalance and dysfunction in families and in social systems. Each member of the family tries to keep the balance of the system. They all seek stability, whether that's unconscious or conscious. They want to maintain the homeostasis of the system. While this often keeps the family afloat in the addiction, it also maintains the problem. At the heart of the problem is feelings of fear, shame, and guilt. There are 3 unspoken rules in a family that maintain the stigma and shame. The first rule, don't talk. The second rule, don't trust. And the third rule, don't feel. To promote change and recovery, you must be willing to break these unspoken rules and create a new homeostasis. Let's rewrite those rules and take the power away from them and the shame and stigma. Instead of don't talk, choose to talk. Talk openly about the addiction. Addiction often thrives in the secrecy of silence. Next, choose to trust. This is really hard because there's a lot of hurt in addiction, but you've got to choose to trust and open yourself up to a relationship with the addict in your life. Rule 3, choose to feel. There are so many different feelings that you can experience in an addiction, and when you're watching someone you care for have an addiction, feel all the feelings, from the deepest despair and sadness of relapse and active addiction to the hope and joy of active recovery. As a family, you can't heal the addiction for them, but you can play an essential role in the path to healing and recovery. Check out part 4 to learn more about how you can help your friends and family with addictions.
Now that you know more about addiction, here is how you can help. The first step is to connect. Make an intentional effort to make or strengthen your connection with the addicts in your life. Let's listen to what Johan Hari has to say about addiction and connection.
I can't tell you I do it consistently and I can't tell you it's easy, is to say to the addicts in my life that I want to deepen the connection with them, to say to them, I love you whether you're using or you're not, I love you whatever state you're in, and if you need me, I'll come and sit with you because I love you and I don't want you to be alone or to feel alone. And I think the core of that message, you're not alone, we love you, has to be at every level of how we respond to addicts, socially, politically, and individually. For 100 years now, we've been singing war songs about addicts. I think all along we should have been singing love songs to them, because the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Thank you.
Here are 5 simple ways to help someone with an addiction. Number 1, be with them and make sure that they know that they are not alone. Focus on them as a person, not as an addict. Number 2, do fun activities that will get their mind off of their addiction. Number 3, text message check-ins. Number 4, share with them mindfulness and self-care techniques. Number 5, involve a professional when needed.